Hello, IT enthusiasts. Welcome to another episode of My Computer Careers Get Into IT Live, where we do just that, get into all things IT. Welcome today. Thank you so much for joining us on your Friday. And I certainly want to make sure right off the bat to thank our guest for joining us all the way from Madrid this evening, his time. James, great to see you again.
It's good to be here, man. It's good to be, I suppose it's good to be anywhere, as they say, but it's very nice to be here in Madrid. A beautiful place.
Amen. James has been there 3 days. This is the end of his day, so he has taken one for the team here. We certainly appreciate it. After many meetings, too. I'm sure you've been talking a lot, so here's more talking.
Hey, as long as we're able to talk about CompTIA and especially about people getting jobs, I'm happy to help anytime.
You can certainly do that all day long. And that's just what we're going to talk about today, folks. So, I'm sure most of you read the description. If not, we want to talk about kind of the realities of the job market. There's been all kinds of news recently. I'm sure you've seen the headlines in the last 6 to 12 months about layoffs in big tech. And I actually sent a note to James a couple of weeks ago or a few weeks ago, just saying, asking for a little more analysis. And he was nice enough to provide kind of his opinions and some data as well. And we turned that into an article, and I just thought it really made a lot of sense for us to dig in a little bit on those comments and opinions that Dr. Stanger sent over. So before we jump right in, I just want to give the proper background. Dr. James Stanger, Chief Technology Evangelist, CompTIA. James Stanger is an authority in security, open source, network administration, and IT education. He has consulted with corporations, governments, and learning institutions worldwide for more than 20 years. He is also an award-winning author and blogger. So once again, James, thank you.
Anytime, man. It's great to be here. You almost make me sound official with that.
You're official. You don't want to admit it, we will. You're official. I mean, look right here. It says award-winning, buddy. I'm in PR.
Well, there we go.
You can put award-winning in front of yourself. You're good to go. All right. Why don't we jump into the realities of the tech job market, if you don't mind?
You bet.
All right. Looking at the numbers, James, CompTIA, you do a great job of breaking out and then kind of analyzing the monthly Bureau of Labor Statistics, tech sector data, typically comparing the tech sector to the national averages. If you don't mind, can you just tell folks what you've seen over the last, 2 or 3 months?
Sure. It's one of the places that everybody ought to go, first of all, is to CompTIA.org, and it's the Tech Jobs Report. Just type in CompTIA Tech Jobs Report. I'm lucky enough where I can stand on the shoulders of giants. Tim Herbert, my boss, and really cool folks, April, they do a great job every month of providing a kind of evergreen information about what's going on. And I think it's interesting you bring up the idea of the tech world. First of all, let's clarify, there is what people will call tech, right? You know what I mean? The whole idea of what's happening, say, in Silicon Valley, right? Things like that. Yep. What we like to talk about is what's happening in overall tech, and that tech meaning in multiple industries. And don't you think, Aaron, that's one of the first things I think that people get kind of hung up on is they take a look at just a few probably unrepresentative samples of things like layoffs and things, rather than looking at the entire use of tech throughout the industry.
No doubt.
So, because we can, I think gone are the days largely where we take a look at just several tech companies, whether it be Google or Meta or Microsoft or AWS, and that's all fine. I think it's much more important to think about how tech is found in any sector, whether it be finance, healthcare, manufacturing. You could even call it fintech, I suppose, government. Yep. So there are a lot of different sectors. So what we're seeing really is not anywhere near any sort of doomsday, not anywhere near. That's in broad strokes. I'll end with that.
Yeah. And we are gonna unpack a lot of what you just said, as we progress, because a lot of that you provided. I love the way that you broke it out for us, and just in terms of, and we don't need specific data, but in terms of tech performance versus the national average in jobs over the last few months. is tech performing better, or is it on par with what we're seeing on the national level?
It performs better than the average job market, so it performs better.
Got it.
We're seeing, and we're seeing generally an unemployment rate in tech, at least according to the indicators that we're able to really look at, that's lower than the average unemployment rate, let's say in the United States, for example.
Yeah.
So that tech rate remains really so low, really, that at least according to traditional employment, is kind of almost no unemployment. In other words, if you're at 4%, let's say 5% even, people would consider that to be kind of no unemployment, and that's actually a lower number than that.
Well, it's interesting, James, because that obviously always stands out to me as well. So there's a reporter over at Computer World that we've spoken to here, Lucas Marine, or Marion, and he joined us, and he was talking about your data. He grabs your data every month. He has a running column where he breaks out what's happening, and those are one of the things that he highlighted was the fact that the unemployment rate is below the national average, which you guys highlight. He was very quick to talk about the realities of the tech industry as well, based on or touching on what you just said when you led the conversation. So, you aren't the only folks out there espousing this. There are a lot of smart folks in the industry are doing the same.
And I have seen people, personally that I know, who, for whatever reason, the company, moved on from them, laid them off, however you want to put it. It wasn't a couple of people that I knew weren't terminated for cause; they were laid off. When these things happen, there are reasons why. Companies will have their reasons. Is it as cynical as raising stock price so we jettison some jobs? Is it that in the tech world, and I'll say the tech world in terms of, say, Silicon Valley companies, they're always buying new companies every year, and then at every couple of 3 years, there's always a question, well, did that purchase work or not? And then you have layoffs. There can also be layoffs to improve stock price. I've heard that sort of thing before. But I think it's really important to think of things in terms of what companies usually do in that tech world. Having said that, the two people that I know that got laid off, one, I won't mention the name, but a very, very large tech company that you would know in the Bay Area. It took him forever to get a job. I think it was about 3.5 weeks. It was, it got a really cool job too, with more pay. Okay.
Yep.
So, and I realize that's one out of a drop. And I know that there are people who do lose jobs. But if you take a look at the CompTIA Tech Jobs Report, and this report's for August, I realize we're in September, right? But every indicator we have to study, lags a month. And I'm not sure lag is the right word to use there, but it is lower. And there are elements where we have seen certain layoffs across all sectors occur, in a bit higher than we've seen in the past. We have seen that, but you know what? It still is way lower than most any other sector in terms of layoffs.
Got it. Okay, so the IT industry is staying afloat, obviously, and we'll get into a little bit more about not just staying afloat but doing well. Depending on who you ask, though, we are in or we are heading towards a recession. Again, depending on who you talk to. If that's the case, what's that mean for our industry? Tech hopefuls and professionals. Oh no, we're going to be in a recession. What's that mean?
It's a really good question. I think one of the first things that can happen is if we're going into a recession, there are a lot of drivers for that. But one of them, obviously we have higher interest rates. And so money is harder to come by. So if you want to be a tech worker working in a startup and things like that, that might be a tougher place to be. Because startups, traditionally anyway, have relied on, I won't use the phrase easy money, but have relied on money that's available through lower interest rates and things like that. That's less available, so you could see that. That could happen. The other thing that would happen in terms of recession is generally technologists are one of the sectors that can be a bit more resilient to layoffs, because it used to be maybe 20 years ago, even maybe, I don't know, maybe 10 years ago, that, well, we could let go certain amounts of tech workers because are we all that reliant? Can't we double up on somebody? If we let go of James, Aaron can take up that slack kind of thing. But what we're finding is that much unlike 10 years ago, 20 years ago, companies rely so much on tech that you need people around to manage that stuff. And I realize a lot of automation, a lot of process changes have happened over the last 10 years, but that still doesn't mean we can easily do without workers. We still need them.
And
so,
I'm sorry, please go ahead.
You're fine. Go ahead.
Well, just to go a little further, on that, we've proven the tech industry has proven to be resilient. And we actually we put together an article, and I think you and I have talked about this before. I think it was several months ago, a year ago, maybe even, as people were talking about a possible recession. And we looked back at recessions, previous recessions, and how many recessions we've had actually in the U.S. Over a certain period of time. And in looking at the data, the tech industry not only maintained, but thrived, quite literally. And I know that we can say that we're a bit biased sitting here, but looking at the numbers in terms of how quickly the tech industry rebounded versus other sectors, it was remarkably resilient and has proven that way. So what you're saying on top of that tells me that things are going to be okay, even if that's the case.
In general, for example, if you take a look at employment that is considered tech employment, again, it could be in the finance industry or manufacturing or whatever.
Yeah.
We have seen, for example, in the semiconductor and the components manufacturing, we have seen in August 2,500 fewer jobs, but there's still north of 1 million jobs,
right?
Available. In telecommunications, actually, we've seen 700 added. I find that interesting because telecommunications in the entire tech sector, oftentimes, if there's some sort of downturn or whatever, that's one of those that can be the canary in the coal mine, meaning can experience problems early on. But they just added 700, right, to that. We're seeing more in cloud. We're seeing more in various types of elements, including software. Software, quite a big increase. So I find that interesting that we're seeing increases also not only in software but in telecommunications, but also data analysts, data scientists. We need more of them. And some people might say, well, that's not necessarily a tech career, James. Somebody who's doing pen testing and security, or somebody who's doing cloud is not necessarily a data analyst. But I'm going to claim that, for the purposes of this, because I see it as certainly an adjacent job role, a set of job roles.
All right. So let's, there's been a lot of talk in the headlines, layoffs. Layoffs in big tech. Look at Intel. They've announced they're going to lay off 15,000 people. That's a big number. People stand back.
Huge numbers.
Yeah. That's scary. That's a lot of people. So you've shared some really great insight as I talked about, into why we might want to take those headlines with a grain of salt. Let's dig into a few of these insights that you sent over. Can you share your opinion on which roles are potentially laid off or maybe laid off in those big tech companies?
Well, a lot of those types of job roles are things that are ancillary to technology, right? They could be people in, I don't know about project managers. The great thing about project managers, they get laid off and then they just find a job immediately.
Anyway.
Everybody needs that.
Yeah.
But there are so many things, from administrative assistants to people who are evangelists, people in positions that aren't necessarily tech but are supporting, could be marketing and things like that. So all of those numbers add up. So if you're somebody in the tech world who is somebody who's even help desk, or somebody who's in the cloud, there's still, I still see considerable demand.
Okay. So
as far as job roles, I think covers the job roles. I'll say anything repetitive. If your job, even if it's considered a tech role, if it's something that requires a lot of repetition. That's something that could get automated. I'm not sure the economy takes care of that as much as the progress of tech. Anyway, sorry, Aaron. Yes.
No, not at all. James, please, open forum. That's why we're here. And I really, I've glommed onto that point. That point that you make about layoffs, I hear the same thing. I'm not averse to that. I hear that there's layoffs. I don't really understand what's going on in the industry. And then I hear kind of the way that you explain that. Layoffs aren't necessarily for IT folks. It's for folks working at IT companies who are in other roles, accounting or PR or whatever the case may be. And I think that makes a lot of sense. You also made the point that tech isn't just an industry, it's everywhere.
Yeah.
What did you mean by that?
A couple of things. Usually when we talk about big tech, we'll mention huge companies like Intel, Cisco, IBM, et cetera. And those are the ones that are relatively easy to follow. You know what I mean? Whenever there are websites you can go to, right, that record, because in most states in the United States will require, if somebody's going to do layoffs, then they have to list what's going on there, because the Bureau of Labor Statistics wants to see those things. But so many of those people, for example, one of the persons got let go of a really big tech company in the Bay Area, ended up working for a small university. Now, there are a lot of universities out there, and they require a lot of IT people,
especially now.
And if they do layoffs, no one covers that, right? Because the numbers might be too small. But once you add up all of those community colleges, universities, and I'm just picking that sector, there's a lot of jobs in there, and they absorb a lot of the layoffs that happen, and we see that just constantly. The minute we start seeing that layoffs happen, and then there's this kind of pool of workers that starts adding up, trust me, we'll let you know. We have no vested interest in showing, oh, there's tons of jobs. Really, people say, well, yeah, because you just make it easy to get jobs. Then that's not the case. I still see a lot of companies being very picky. Even though they need lots of workers, they're not lowering their standards. And I think this is one thing that people don't realize, is that tech companies can't afford to lower their standards to just bring in a body. That doesn't solve the problem. So when it comes to just the tech industry, I think, for example, in manufacturing, we're seeing also in areas that have to do with operational technology. I'm talking about things like the energy sector. They're all looking to hire people.
And you also mentioned, James, I'm sorry if I interrupt, just keep rolling past me, but I get excited about the topic. You also mentioned, it's not, you've touched on it, it's not just Silicon Valley, but there are these regional tech hubs that are being developed throughout the country. Do you think that, or is there anything else you'd like to expand on there that would help? You bet.
There are so many different regional hubs that are there. I mean, there's some. It's hard to call this one regional because it's so utterly massive. But the Washington D.C. area, Northern Virginia, things like that. But there's also what they will call the Silicon Forest, right? Seattle area. That's where I live, more or less. Seattle. They call that from Portland, maybe even Eugene, all the way up to Seattle. Austin, Texas, another major hub. The Salt Lake City area is one. You'll see also in the middle of the country, because there are various listening posts, but also a lot of telcos, that there are sectors there, all of them doing quite well.
And here in the Triangle, we're starting to establish ourselves. Yeah.
What am I thinking? Yeah.
I got to throw it in there, James. I got to throw it in.
Raleigh, Durham, and the whole, sure. Another major sector. New York City, of course.
I guess the point that James is making there is that, we're focused on Silicon Valley, but the Silicon Valley is moving. And where IT is so important, hubs are being established around the industry all over the country. Yeah. And folks are moving there.
That's right. And there's another thing to think about. And there's migrations that happen in interesting ways. A friend of mine is basically looking to go get to transfer jobs from one company to the next, and got tired of living in the big city of Seattle and is going to live near Billings, Montana, of all places. It's around there, right? And some people would be like, I don't want to live out in the middle of nowhere or whatever. Other people might. Point is, though, is that there are data centers that are put up whether it be by cloud entities, large companies, or whatever. Some of those are in the middle of nowhere in Oregon. There are many in near you, actually, the data center. They are usually placed in places where there are various factors that make a data center really successful. Cheap water, cheap electricity, not too many natural disasters happening all the time, things like that. And that's where they'll build. And so you see a lot of people getting jobs in those areas as well.
Got it. So I want to get back really quickly to one point that Dr. Stanger made for everybody. When CompTIA talks about the data and the numbers in the tech industry, they're reporting when it's positive, they're reporting when it's negative.
Oh, yeah.
They are the organization that is reporting the facts. So it's not there, they're not going out and trying to make a silk purse out of a sow's ear. They are simply reporting the data and then analyzing what they're seeing in specific roles and passing that along to you folks.
It's, honesty is the best policy. And also, when it comes to really understanding what people need in the tech sector, they're really looking for, when I say they, I'm talking about hiring managers. They're really looking for folks who have what I would call unique skills, unique skill sets that come through hands-on learning rather than just memorizing stuff. So if jobs were to become more scarce, the competition then begins, right? So, but my point is that what's so interesting is that because tech has become so crucial to organizations, even though we have a glut of jobs, the idea is to focus on, kind of unique skills that you might have. And unique skills, for example, in cybersecurity, isn't so much just thinking in terms of confidentiality, integrity, and availability. It's actually trying to figure out, as a security analyst, how can I learn how to curate content, to capture a data set and analyze it and look for a hacker? I'm talking those kinds of unique skill sets.
Yeah, makes a lot of great sense, as always. All right, so I don't want to put you on the spot here, James. I don't know if you have the data in front of you, and if you don't, that's fine. You were talking about tech roles. And I know that typically a lot of times you break out which tech roles you're seeing the most job postings for. And I know you touched on it a little bit.
Sure.
Do you know which roles right now?
The specific roles that seem to be really interesting lately, ones that usually what lists the top of is software developers, just because there's so much of a need for them. And we're talking, and in terms of software development, one of those areas has to do with use of JavaScript. And I realize JavaScript's not a job role, that's a technology, but front-end developers to front-end developers to even full stack, we're seeing good increases. Another increase we're seeing is project managers. Another has to do with data analysts, and with the analysts, that usually these days is getting tied to what they will call emerging tech. So data analysts and emerging tech, and three guesses as to what emerging tech might be in relation adjacent to data analytics, and that's AI. Right. We're not seeing. And I probably made Tim, my boss, uncomfortable there, because emerging tech doesn't necessarily mean AI, and there's nothing in the numbers that say it's for AI, but I can only imagine it's that. And of course, we need better data analytics out there. Moving on, besides that, believe it or not, boring old tech support specialists is another growing area. Yeah. And I think so many people, I've noticed, automation is getting rid of tech support and self-help pages and all that stuff. That ain't what the numbers are showing us. So to me, that's really interesting. And then systems analysts, and those systems analysts mean working with legacy systems from mainframes all the way through to very current, Kubernetes-based cloud, analyzing the efficiency of systems. So those are some of the top ones.
Got it. Beautiful. Do you know how many folks, I always like to give an idea of the breadth of the industry still. Do you know how many folks are working in tech right now? I think last time it was 5 million-ish. Is that wrong?
Yeah. I think we're at that level. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah,
all right.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah.
All right. So Amazon's stealing a lot of headlines right now with the return to 5 days in the office. The return to work has a lot of folks, I'm not going to say scared, but maybe worried in IT, especially, because we've gotten kind of accustomed to remote. Are remote job opportunities still available in IT?
Oh yeah, I think you're going to find a lot of remote job opportunities out there available in IT. Never underestimate the imitative nature of tech companies. Once one tech company sees one go, then a lot of them will follow after them. You
Right.
know what I mean? There's that.
Yeah.
And as far as it's not our place at CompTIA to talk about RTO versus non-RTO, sort of thing.
Yep.
To stay out of that sort of thing. But yes. I'm here in Europe right now. Realize that's not the U.S., but here in Europe, I've noticed. I've been in Stockholm, Spain. Now I'll be in further in Eastern Europe. I'm noticing that they, really are a hybrid model between, about 3 days a week in the office.
Got it.
That's general pattern that I suppose we see. There are remote job opportunities out there. I was talking to one person who manages the IT for Kraft Stadium. That's Boston, right? Isn't
Yes.
that the big Boston National Football League stadium?
Yeah.
If I didn't get that right, shoot me. Sorry.
No, you did.
Even through COVID, he's like, I don't have remote opportunities really. You've got to be there to help manage the IT there. So that's one example of something that never went remote. But I see a lot of opportunities out there still for remote, as long as it makes sense. And it's just got to make sense. My big thing is any great CEO is going to have data that points them to the right conclusion. And far be it from me to say, remote's the only way to go, or not remote is the only way to go.
Right.
And share that data.
I really appreciate that, James. And for anybody who wants to go, and I believe it's in the data that you share as well, CompTIA does a great job of actually showing how many jobs, what percentage of jobs are remote. So it will give you an idea of, if you're looking for strictly remote, what the job market looks like for you. But to James's point, you're going to have to, if you're really looking for a position, you're going to have to be maybe willing to, meet the opportunity and go hybrid or whatever the case may be, depending on the job.
That's right. That's right. And you can, for cybersecurity jobs, you could even look to like cyberseek.org. Now, that's not all of IT. That's just, I shouldn't say just cybersecurity jobs, but that's only cybersecurity jobs that it really focuses on. It's another place where you can go find out, what types of jobs are remote or not.
Got it. All right, I can't help myself. I always ask about skills-based hiring. I think it's my newest thing. I can't get rid of it. It's in my brain nonstop. More orgs are now dropping the 4-year degree. You and I have talked about it. You actually joined, and we specifically talked about this topic for a whole segment or whole episode. That's another data point that you all share is, what percentage of organizations are dropping the mandatory 4-year degree. Do you have that? Do you know exactly maybe what that looks like?
The exact data by hiring for years of experience. Yeah, we have the percent of active postings not requiring. Now, that's not requiring a 4-year degree. So I'm sorry to include the not in there because it could be confusing.
No, that's right. Yeah.
So we're seeing the percentage of total about 86%, IT support specialists 72%, network and systems administrators half, 51%.
Sure.
Database administrators less than half, web and UX less than 50%. So are those the stats that you saw as well?
They are. And I thought I saw, and I don't know for sure, James, because it may have been a couple of months ago, that just the overall is right around about half, 45%, and rising, based on this push by the government and others to really highlight skills-based hiring. But it's not easy, and it's gonna go slowly. But it seems like we're seeing an impact in tech.
Well, we've actually seen some of the statistics go back, what some people would consider backwards. In other words, there are still people saying, no, we need a 4-year degree. That's a very, very slow turn. That requires a culture change in many ways. Hiring is an exercise in risk management. Aaron, if you're hiring me, it's like, geez, I don't know if I want to hire that Stanger guy, or if I do, I better have many data points. And what companies are realizing is that a degree is not just the only factor to bring in, and then you just throw that out. That's happening, but it's still slow. it's still a very slow process.
Right, and it will be. I'm sure, and that's not. I'm certainly not an expert in the field, but I think that's pretty obvious. That's the way the world works. That's the way the tech industry works. That's the way big business works, especially. Yeah,
it is. It is. Yeah.
So I guess I just wanted to let's wrap with this question. We're right at a great stopping point. Are you, and this is a leading question, of course, but why not? Are you optimistic about the tech job market? And if so, why should someone consider a career?
Absolutely. The reason why I am interested and optimistic about the tech career market is, first of all, there's a whole lot of nonsense that gets said, and I'm noticing a lot less nonsense. People are starting to realize that technology is not just this mystery box that it's just there and nobody quite knows what to do with it, and they're worried. I see more executives are becoming more tech literate. They do not have what I call they're not technophobic or tech, even worse, tech intolerant. So I'm seeing a lot of good top-down change where people are embracing tech. The other thing I'm noticing that we're seeing at CompTIA is the sheer amount of innovation. I was talking to a friend of mine at AstraZeneca. His name is Bob Venier, and Bob was talking about whenever his workers, he's over all of the data centers, over all the cloud for AstraZeneca, huge biopharm kind of company. And what's really cool is interesting. He said they've all noticed every 3 weeks things massively change on the cloud. Whenever they go up to source something, it's like, where was that? Or wow, the service has changed radically. That kind of change is now standard. So there's a lot less technical backwater going on, or technical eddies where things are going the wrong direction.
Right.
So that's really exciting too.
I just made a note. Once again, I appreciate it. An article on the evolution of C-suite tech intolerance. That is fantastic. I love it.
It can be a problem. It doesn't mean all execs are. I mean, so there's so many executives are incredible at it. But to get to a minimum viable level of security or IT, you have to have techs that have a tolerance for the nuances that tech implementations require.
Yeah.
And if you don't have a tolerance for those nuances, then you're going to run into problems.
All right. So, folks, just to put a button on it, there's opportunities in tech. There's opportunities in specific roles, which James highlighted. Remote work still exists. 4-year degree requirement is starting to maybe ebb a little bit. Hopefully, it's going to be slow. But the main takeaway is there's positivity. The tech industry has changed. Big tech does not define the industry.
That's a great way to put it.
And everybody needs IT. Everybody needs a tech worker nowadays. So if you're considering a career, James is here to tell you, and the data tells us that it's still a good opportunity.
Absolutely. Great way to put it, Aaron. Is it easy to get into this stuff? No, it isn't. There's all sorts of issues. There are all sorts of things you're going to have to do, but is it worth getting into it? Oh yeah.
Love it. All right. Perfect. We'll end it there. James, what I missed? We good?
Nothing at all, man. Just you missed the opportunity for me to thank you. Thank you so much.
We always appreciate having you on, and these conversations are great. We'll do it again. I guarantee it.
Wait.
Best of luck in Madrid. James is all over the world. Who knows? Where are you going next? Are you going home?
Let's see. I'll be in Romania talking to a bunch of folks who run the data centers there. They have cheap electricity in Romania, and there are a lot of workers there. I'll be in Prague at something called Hackfest. And then in October, my goodness, there's all sorts of cool things happening in October.
My goodness. See if you can stop by Oktoberfest.
I'm ready. Yeah.
Sure. All right. James, thank you so much.
Anytime,
everybody, thank you for joining us. Next week, we're going to dig into kind of a military focus and maybe talk a little bit about transitioning from the military to a civilian career. We're not exactly sure yet, but we will certainly be here, and we will announce that early next week. So we will be here same time, same place, and look forward to seeing you. And James, you and I will do this again. I always appreciate it. And if you don't mind hanging around.
You bet, man. Anytime. Okay. Thanks.
Have a great weekend, everyone.